Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with thanking Famida Miller. It was a pleasure speaking with her in person yesterday here in the office. We talked about the Kenyan economy and what were the key catalysts that would trigger a stronger rebound. Thank you, Famida. Macro thoughts. Geopolitical risk is biting back hard. I predict the spot crude oil market reprice has further to run and will lift Brent crude over $70 a barrel. Take a look at this chart. Brent crude, last time I checked, we were around about 62.40, but we've rallied quite sharply. 62.40 on the December contract, but my point applies. Home thoughts, I went back to Tony Montana, Scarface. He famously said, "I always tell the truth, even when I lie." Something to think about. And my favorite is they're both ordering some takeaway food somewhere in Miami, and this sort of balloon goes across the sky, and on it is written, "The world is yours." Political reflections. Palestinian authorities says has frozen ties with the US. This was inevitable. I like this photograph that Ian Bremer posted. Assad shows his gratitude. My conclusions are it's in fact a famous victory, and Assad has plenty to give thanks for to Vladimir Putin. 13th of November this year, I said President Assad with his Russian, Iranian and Lebanese allies resisted the regime changes in Syria. And I think that's the first time they've been resisted, maybe Ukraine as well. 5th of October 2015, which was around the date that Putin spoke at UNGA and then intervened in Syria. And you consider it's just 25 months of intervention. And I said then, Putin fancies himself the flycatcher in Syria, the fly trap. The speed of execution confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor that will have to be considered. It is a breathtaking rebound. The Syrian Presidency posted a number of photographs. Have a look at this one. And then Maxim Sushkov, who I follow on Twitter, said, "Thread how Russia works on Syria plan." Within 72 hours at different levels, Moscow had contacts with Turkey, Iran, Qatar, UAE. Conversation with some were deeper than with others, but the idea is to engage everyone. Assad's visit was cherry on the top of these efforts. Having face-to-face conversation with him was key to coordinate the next steps, get his own feedback, views on Russian initiative. Ensure he doesn't upset them. Another photograph that the Syrian Presidency posted. And then the First Lady was met with the Orthodox Christian Church. Most of us know who has been protecting and defending Christians and other religious minorities in Syria. And this is an important point, and part of why my sympathy lies with him, because he's not nihilistic. He's trying to create this mosaic, whereas the others are a bunch of head choppers. Hariri has returned to Lebanon to tackle the political crisis. Apparently, he's considering withdrawing his resignation. The Saudis, of course, are holding his children hostage. And that goes back to the piece I wrote about the wannabe king, and I was quoting Robert Fisk, who said, "When Saad Hariri's jet touched down at Riyadh on the evening of 3rd November, the first thing he saw was a group of Saudi policemen surrounding the plane. When they came aboard, they confiscated his mobile phone and those of his bodyguards. Thus was Lebanon's Prime Minister silenced." No one in the Trump administration knows what's going on, the European ambassador told Newsweek. Vanity Fair, interesting article about Jared Kushner and how he's dismantling a family empire. There's a primal scene. It takes place in neither Green Eden, where the snake spoke sweetly, nor the master bedroom of your first house, the one by the railroad tracks, where spying from a closet You watched your parents in flagranto delicto. But at the Fontainebleau on Miami Beach, where San Giansana talked Castro with the CIA, Jerry Lewis got into all kinds of mischief in the bellboy, and Tony Montana scoped bikinis on the pool deck. If you're a Jew of a certain vintage, the Fontainebleau means swank. It's the fantasy showroom of the American dream. US says it's killed more than 100 al-Shabaab fighters in a fresh strike in Somalia. The escalation of attacks this year is remarkable. Martina Stevis. I've been saying that as well. International markets. The US economy, Yellen will leave to a successor, Jerome Powell. Explained in 9 charts by Bloomberg. Take a look at this image of inflation. And it's really confounded everybody's expectations. You would have thought with such rampant money printing that inflation would rear its ugly head sooner rather than later. Currency markets, let's take a look. Euro dollar has edged higher, 117.54, seemingly untroubled by the issues in Germany. Dollar index 93.92. Japanese yen, that's firmed again. It's had a strong few sessions, 112.05. Swiss franc 0.9905. The pound 132.46, maybe running out of steam. The Australian dollar 0.7567, and that's down 10 ticks today. India rupee 64.815. South Korean won 1090.65. That's interesting, below 1100. Brazilian real 325.86, Egyptian pound 17.6575, South African rand, that's firmer, 13.92 to 94 area as of now. Dollar index, let me put up a 3-month chart, 93.50. As I went on ad infinitum previously is the key level and we're above it. Euro dollar, look, a little bit taken aback by how quickly the market bought up the euro. So watching it a little bit, but eventually we're going to go to 114.50 in my view, though there are lots of bullish people expecting a significant move through 120. Bitcoin has value because people say it has value, Novogratz said in an interview on Bloomberg Television. Starting a $500 million hedge fund to invest in cryptocurrencies, said Bitcoin will likely end the year at $10,000. And smaller rival Ether will trade around $500. Bitcoin, you can look at it as digital gold. Take you back to my trade of the year at the beginning of the year. Optimal portfolio was long Bitcoin, and then long Bitcoin, short gold. Commodity markets, Bloomberg Commodity Spot Index, a measure of performance that doesn't account for rolling futures contracts, is up 5% in 2017. So, notwithstanding all the fireworks, it's barely up. Gold, let's take a look at that. Oh, that's moving higher, 1284.50. Emerging markets, it's ironic how Turkey's currency is getting whacked so much this close to Thanksgiving, was David Inglis's tongue-in-cheek remark. Have a look at this from JS Blockland, disturbing graph. Turkey's lira is down more than 60% against the euro since the outbreak of the financial crisis. Mugabe has resigned as Zimbabwe's president in a letter to parliament. As we discovered, I said when it unravels, it can unravel at exponential speed. His resignation letter was brief and to the point. Thank you, Neil Coleman, for that. Over the weekend, I wrote Zimbabweans have only known one leader, and that leader is now gone. I also said the military which launched his decapitation are certainly set to shape the outcome, but now have a tiger by the tail. And then I went back to an old Virillia comment, which I like. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form, not in the place of production, but in the street. I also said this is a very big deal, winds of change, and also look at Angola, where Dos Santos has been removed. Every vestige of Dos Santos has been removed at some incredible speed as well. The sense of elation on the streets of Harare is profound, everyone dancing, embracing, shouting, "We are free, free at last," said Zoe Flood. And then there was an interesting tweet from Mamagaisa before he resigned, saying Mugabe still seems to be living in a bubble. It's untenable. The man needs to be saved from himself. The military intervened, his party fired him, Zimbabwe has marched against him, his cabinet snubbed him, parliament is impeaching him, but still seems to be living in a bubble. No longer. My piece over the weekend was the genie's out of the bottle. Mnangagwa, who's expected any moment now, but previously was saying he cannot trust his life in President Mugabe's hands. Morgan Tsvangirai has asked for free and fair elections without violence. Tsvangirai addressed thousands of protesters gathered outside the Zimbabwean parliament in Harare. And as I said again in that article over the weekend, ZANU-PF need to invite the opposition into government, look for a big cash boost from the international community in order to stabilize them now. I said what is clear is that Zimbabwe is entering a new normal and that in the medium term Zimbabwe has the potential to be one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. The people want to grab that opportunity with both hands. If ZANU-PF want to be part of that new, more optimistic future, they need to invite the opposition into government, look for a big cash boost from the international community in order to stabilize them now. Tsvangirai also said it would be unfortunate if Mnangagwa was to extend the same governance culture that Mugabe pursued over the past 37 years. I don't think it's possible. He said birds of the same feather flock together. I said if I were Mr. Lacoste the crocodile, I would be dialing Morgan and saying, buddy, let's kickstart the Zimbabwe gig together. The now, I agree, is complex. Liquidity is required. Probably need about $2 billion to be put to work here. But I'm seriously bullish medium term. I think this can be an elephant. GDP per capita on a purchasing parity basis, Zimbabwe compared to Sub-Saharan Africa, that's from Birdie Word. Mugabe's woes wipe out $6 billion from Zimbabwe's skewed stocks. This is the same thing as Venezuela. It was a flight to quality. Stocks sort of kept the value, but it's terribly overpriced, so we're expecting a correction. I tweeted Boris Johnson that Zimbabwe is a monster maraschino cherry on top of the cake opportunity for the new post-Brexit Britain. And he is incredibly amusing and erudite, as he was when I met him here in Nairobi. President Zuma in Angola was in Zimbabwe for deliberations. He was meeting with President Lourenço. It is President Lourenço who's hit the ground running. And on that basis, I would go limit long Angolan Eurobonds. The link is on the website. I look at the long-term ones, 2025. The yield is 7.55%. I think you can see a substantial tightening in that yield. Who's next? 2017 has been a tough year for Africa's strongmen. That's Quartz Africa. Yaya Jammeh was kicked out. Jose Eduardo dos Santos stepped down. And Robert Mugabe was pushed off. Still 6 weeks to go. South African all shares up 20.84% and at a fresh record high. Dollar versus Rand, and Rand has been firming here. It's trending towards 13.90. Nigerian all share up 36.19% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index up an eye-watering 50.79% year to date. Fitch has downgraded Namibia's sovereign credit rating to junk status. Mo Ibrahim says Africa's demographic bulge is a two-edged sword, which is something I wrote about in November 2014 when I was speaking about Ouagadougou. During the Arab Spring, now in the bleak midwinter, nearly all commentators spoke of how this North African wildfire could not leap the Sahara and head to Sub-Saharan Africa. The reasons were that the state incumbents had a monopoly on the tools of violence and would bring overwhelming force and violence to bear. We need to ask ourselves, how many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead in such a situation? I asked, is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? I said, this is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. And I said, therefore, the preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. Overthrowing incumbents is all about acceleration, momentum, and speed, best characterized by the German word blitzkrieg. And I was talking about Burkina Faso, saying out of a population of 17 million in Burkina Faso, over 60% are aged between 17 and 24 years, according to the World Bank, and this is another point to note. The country's youth flex their muscles. What's clear is that a very young, very informed, very connected African youth demographic, many characterize it as a demographic dividend, but which for beautiful Blaise turned into a demographic terminator. And I said this is set to alter the existing equilibrium between the rulers and the subjects, and the rebalancing has begun. And I think what we've seen recently is further evidence of that. Nairobi all-share surged 3.151% yesterday, biggest daily percentage gain for 13 months. Safaricom closed at a record high of 26.75. That's up 44.75% on a total return basis this year. On the 6th of November, at the time of these calls for a boycott, I said this is the best time to buy Safaricom. And the point I would make is that opposition hashtag warriors who picked on Safaricom for this boycott, and also with the Eurobond when they poured a lot of cold water on it, have proved the best reverse signal, really. Nairobi NSE 20 up 19.82% so far this year. EGAD reported first half earnings. The loss after tax widened to 20.536 million shillings. Revenue slumped 38.5%. EPS was negative 64 cents from negative 24 cents, so significantly worse. They said during the 6-month period under review, the company made an after-tax loss of 20.5 million, as compared to an after-tax loss of 7.6 million in the previous year. This is principally due to the prolonged dry weather, which has resulted in reduced crop and increased coffee upkeep costs. Due to the turbulence in the international coffee prices, there was a significant decrease in coffee sales revenues due to lower coffee volumes and a decrease in the market prices of coffee in the period. No interim dividend. The point is it's valued at 820 million shillings, which is $8.2 million. Go and work out what the land is worth. So, you have this dichotomy in that earnings really are not reflecting the reality of the value. I wish you a great day, and thank you for stopping by.